right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, in the media, there are a lot of takes about the worst day of the presidency that will cost Trump the election. CNN would probably tell you it's the day of his interview with Lester Holt whenever he discussed firing James Comey. MSNBC would probably say Charlottesville. But the real answer, I suspect, could be yesterday. The culmination of the two worst aspects of Trump's presidency in real days, and more important, the incredible impact that it's going to have on the lives of millions of American citizens as a consequence of policy. It began in the morning with President Trump tweeting as an active coronavirus patient from the White House residence seeking to downplay the disease. I covered in depth yesterday how politically foolish running with the line, "Don't be afraid" is in the middle of a pandemic, where the vast majority of Americans actually are afraid. And it seems Trump only sought to make it even worse by resurrecting a talking point from the previous lowest moment of his presidency, tweeting, quote, "Flu season's coming up. Many people every year, sometimes over 100,000, and despite the vaccine, die from the flu. Are we going to close down our country? No. We learn to live with it, just like we are learning to live with COVID. In most populations, far less lethal." I truly could not believe it. He literally just brought back the just the flu talking point, which he has not used since mid-February, which is exactly when the American people turned on him for downplaying coronavirus. It is absolute split-screen reality. On one screen, you have the President of the United States, who was waylaid for days in a hospital and shot up full of experimental drugs. On the other, he is tweeting that actually, virus ain't so bad, compares it to the flu. And by the way, the flu has never killed 100,000 people in a single year, which would actually still be half of current COVID deaths. And let's put the science and numbers aside even for a second. As a matter of public opinion, Trump is dramatically out of step with the American people. 65% of respondents in the latest poll, a poll conducted after the president contracted coronavirus, say they are either very or somewhat worried they or a family member is going to be exposed to coronavirus. That is only a 5% drop, 5 from March 2020. Couple that with recent Morning Consult polling shows that the plurality of Americans still think the worst is yet to come for the disease. And worst of all for Trump, 3/4 of people do not trust him as a reliable source of information on the virus. So, even if he was right about coronavirus, he would still find himself on the wrong side of public opinion. This tweet alone was enough to kill him before Election Day, in my opinion, and it validates the thesis made up by so many minds of so many Americans that he simply does not take coronavirus all that seriously. But seemingly, he wanted to make it all a lot worse. And that brings me to something that we covered earlier in the show, when Trump intervened to kill economic stimulus negotiations on Capitol Hill with Democrats, tweeting, quote, "Nancy Pelosi is asking for a $2.4 trillion bailout for poorly run, high-crime Democrat states, money that is in no way related to COVID-19. We made a very generous offer of $1.6 trillion, and as usual, she was not negotiating in good faith. I am rejecting their request and looking to the future of our country. I have instructed my representatives to stop negotiating until after the election, when, immediately after I win, we will pass a major stimulus bill that focuses on hardworking Americans and small business." That right there might be the death knell, folks. It is not an exaggeration to say that this will likely be the single most unpopular thing he has done as president. Just to give you an idea of how unpopular, well, 72% of Americans supported a $2 trillion stimulus in the latest New York Times Siena poll. But even ignore the popularity for a second. Think about the literally hundreds of thousands of small businesses that are guaranteed to go under without a stimulus before January 2021 at the latest. You might say it's a shrewd move. The president shouldn't just give Pelosi what she wants. I agree. But if you think that, you're really missing the point. This is what Pelosi and Chuck Schumer want. They are absolutely content to let this country burn economically before Election Day. There's nothing they want less than to give Trump any sort of broadly popular win than an economic stimulus, which is most likely why they would have just dragged their feet and made demands and more for the next month. Nothing would have happened. Trump appeared late last night to realize how much of a blunder his original declaration was, tweeting that the House and Senate should immediately approve $25 billion for airline payroll support and $135 billion for Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Now, both of these will be fully paid for with unused funds from the CARES Act. Have this money. I will sign now. He added, if I am sent a standalone bill for stimulus checks of $1,200, they will go out to our great people immediately. I am ready to sign right now. Are you listening, Nancy? But look, At this point, damage is done. Pelosi's already rejected a so-called clean bill outright, and Trump's original declaration bearing the responsibility for killing the negotiations is a political and economic disaster, because he actually said that instead of passing stimulus, McConnell should focus on getting Amy Coney Barrett's nomination through the Congress. And look, I think that's great, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's popular. In fact, I think the only way to really make it politically tenable would be for the GOP Senate to actually do something for American workers. So that's where we are. Trump somehow found a way to double down on the two most unpopular positions that he's held in recent months with less than 28 days until the election. Yesterday, we threw up a photo that Joe Biden tweeted out from his campaign account, just to illustrate how insane this election has become, and how much of a farce this is all to our lives. How in the hell did one of the most important elections of our lifetime, in a turning point of American history, come down to this? With Trump seemingly no reason except listening to the libertarian idiots around him, embracing positions like being mask skeptical, which are literally 85-15 issues in public opinion. Joe Biden is a tool of the globalist establishment. Wall Street is licking their chops at the prospect that he wins the presidency. So are the defense contractors. So is Hollywood. So is mainstream media. He couldn't be loved by more of the worst people on the planet. And the people that Trump's election was a direct F you and middle finger to. And somehow, Trump has made it that even the guy that they so desperately want to be president is ahead in the polls. It's mostly a sick joke, except that it's not a joke, because it has ramification for the lives of millions. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, to see exactly in the same day, the two single most unpopular things that he holds in his mind, listening to these libertarian fools whenever it comes to stimulus, and just the flu on coronavirus. It's like, why bring it back? Like now is the time? 28 days before the election? It's just amazing to watch. I mean, I actually saw Jonathan Swan over at Axios that there are people in the White House who are like, maybe he wants to lose. I don't know. Honestly, I have no other explanation.
If he did want to lose, he could not possibly do a better job. Yes. Because you add to that, he also tweeted out something about, like, we're going to release the unredacted documents about Russiagate and whatever. It's like, dude, you were winning when it was like the Democrats who were obsessed with this thing, and now you're the one obsessed with this shit that nobody cares about. Like, it's unbelievable how much he has lost the plot here. And look, the bottom line is you're exactly right. Was Pelosi really negotiating in good faith? No, she wasn't. The right political move, and the thing that the American people would have loved you for is if you called her bluff and was like, great, we're going to pass the $2.2 trillion stimulus that she passed through the House. Right. And her move, which they executed perfectly from a political standpoint, which I'm going to talk more about in my radar, which I find morally unconscionable, by the way, but politically, they scored the big win, because not only does he not get a stimulus out of money to people that could help him with his reelection, but he took full ownership of it.
Yes.
Like, look at me. I am killing the deal. You are not getting help because of me. He did all of that. And I think about the flu thing, too. It seems like ages ago that the Woodward tapes were released. What was that, like 3 weeks ago or something? It was like just a few weeks ago. But one of the things that was a big scandal there was that back at the time when the president was originally saying, oh, it's just like the flu, no big deal, don't worry, he was privately saying to Woodward that he knew that this thing was a killer, that he knew how deadly it was, and then went out and spun a completely different version of reality to the American people. That was a massive, legitimate scandal. And now he's resurrecting the lie that he's already been exposed as knowing better than the lie that he's putting out there to the American people.
It's just the flu thing is, again, the single most unpopular thing he's probably done in the last 4 years. I mean, that was really where he lost so many Americans. And then maybe second to that was up there with tax cuts and jobs. And now basically following that strategy of like, no, we're not going to do stimulus. He's listening to the worst elements of his caucus. I saw Stephen Moore out there bragging about it, saying, oh, Trump, he's calling us bluff. And he's like, if we're going to do true trillion, we should just eliminate income tax. And I would love for him to explain to the 30 million people who don't have any income right now about how a lack of income tax was going to benefit them. I'm sure you would hear a lot about trickle-down economics. Art Laffer also applauded the move, just so you know, the most discredited economist in all of Washington. But those are the people he's listening to. So, what, who am I to say? I don't know. It's just you see the flu thing plus the economic stimulus, the two things which could not wreck his presidency more. And he does them on exactly the same day. And you got to see, he knows how bad he screwed up with that late-night tweet. He must have heard it from everybody in D.C. saying, sir, this is bad.
Yesterday,
you do not want to eat no stimulus because now you own. I remember with that shutdown. I remember whenever he told Pelosi and Chuck, he was in the Oval Office because I think I was there actually, and he was like, what did he say? He's like, I'll own it.
I'll own it.
You shut it down. And they were like gleeful. And I was like, man, he better follow through on this or he's going to get killed. 35 days later, he caved to them. By the way, how many wall miles we got on the southern border? Not very many. So there you go. And that's kind of when I knew when he caved. I was like, rest of the presidency, mostly a wash.
Yesterday was the day when there was like a switch that was flipped between the flu thing, between his just outrageous handling of coronavirus in general and his own illness in particular. And then when he personally took responsibility for pulling the plug on stimulus, yesterday was the day when I think a lot of people finally let go of 2016 and were like, this dude's going to lose.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you know what? I mean, I don't know if you could pull it out at this point. But I keep saying, hey, 4 years ago was Access Hollywood. So what the hell do I know?
Who knows?
All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.